Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my live streams. In this live stream, I am joined by two representatives from CGC, Brittany, marketer extraordinaire, and head grader, Matt. It is good to see both of you guys.
Hey, Reggie.
Hey.
So it's been about 2 weeks since we had an opportunity to come together. What have you guys been up to over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I've just been grading books.
The day job,
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, we hit the ground. Submissions have not slowed down, and they even seem to be picking up. And we're already inundated. So it's full steam ahead for 19.
Very good. Brittany, how about you?
We had our first show last weekend in Yorba Linda, California, a little one-day show, first one of the year, and we doubled our numbers from previous years. So we're wondering if this is going to set the pace for all of our shows for this year. We're working on a virtual line so people have a better customer experience when they're at the booth and they don't spend their whole time waiting to submit their book. They can sign, get a place in line and show, and they'll get a text message when it's their turn to return back to the CGC booth and submit their book. So we were kind of testing that out this weekend and kind of working out the kinks with that to get ready for show season.
That's pretty cool. Did we just break some news on the show already in the first 5 minutes? Because I don't know. Did people know that you guys were doing that?
We sprung
Full surprises.
There's one of many things rolling out.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. It sounds because so when you say that you doubled submission, I guess you mean double submissions for that specific show versus last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And maybe that will set the tone for the year. I guess we will see. How many shows do you guys typically do per year?
I'm sorry?
How many shows do you guys typically attend per year?
Us personally or CGC? CGC. Yeah.
CGC used to do about 55 shows a year, but we recently drastically cut back our show schedule for this year. And I think that we'll do more like
More like how many?
30.
30. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely having some technical issues here. So we're going to have to kind of power through this, and hopefully they get better over the course of the exchange. So I definitely appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedules to join us. This is, as I mentioned before, the second time we've done a live stream together. The first, I think, was pretty well received by people. There were over 1,000 views. I want to say close to, if not exceeding, 100 comments and 100 thumbs up. So I think that video was pretty well received. And I received a ton of messages from people saying how much they learned from that last video that we did on restoration. So my hope is that this video is as good as, if not better, than the first. So with that,
Yeah.
go ahead. So with that, let's go ahead and say some quick hellos to some people here in the chat. I think we have roughly 68 people in the chat. My buddy Big Will is here. Chris is here. Ass Funk is here. Steve Roger, the Wolverine collector, Comic Books NYC. Very Gary Comics is in the house. Hialeah Comics, bro. My buddy Ben, Luis Sparky is in the house. And Burt Nasty 54, Broke Cousin Comics, and Undead Mousy is here as well. And I can tell you, a lot of those guys that I just named off are folks that join my live streams on a regular basis. And many of them actually sent me some of the questions that we are going to dig into today. So shout out to everybody that's watching this live, and shout out to everyone that's going to be watching this thing back on replay. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, I highly recommend that you do so that you can stay abreast of all the content like this that I bring you on a weekly basis. So let's go ahead and do the setup for this thing. So the way that this live stream, which is focused on grading, is going to be structured is that there's going to basically be 3 sections. In section 1, we're going to ask some questions of our CGC guests to help us to understand how we can be better at grading comics ourselves. We'll then shift gears and we'll talk a little bit about the services that CGC actually offers, what their processes and procedures are for receiving books for grading, how they go about grading, how it's different from how we might grade books at home. And in the third section, we're actually going to talk about some of the controversies that exist around grading. We're going to talk about things like Newton rings, consistency of grading, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that these are topics that are foreign to you guys in any way. I think you guys are well equipped to handle these questions. Fair enough?
Fair, yes.
All right. And one of the things that I think people are excited about is they feel that you two are two of the best people to have answering a lot of these questions. And we did a whole introduction for you guys before. We're going to skip some of that stuff because I think by and large, people know who you guys are either through this channel or independent of this channel through the CGC forums and by your reputation. So we're going to skip over some of that stuff. All right.
Okay.
So the very first question that I have for you guys, and again, we're talking about the first segment here, is if someone is new to grading, how should they approach grading? What's the best way for them to get themselves up to speed, to understand how to properly grade a book? Should they go out and get an Overstreet guide and read the criteria that are in there? What are the recommendations for making us smarter about grading?
Yeah, I think the Overstreet Guide is a great starting point because it covers the basics of grading, explains the grading standards, and all the defects that are assigned to each of those. And then beyond that, I would say go online, check scans, say on the Heritage database. Certainly go to shows. I think the best thing is to actually get your hands on comic books and get around people that know what they're doing. So if you have local stores or local conventions or anywhere in town, or even friends that collect, just being around people that have that experience in asking questions, looking at books that they've graded and asking questions about why they've assigned a grade and how this particular defect's treated. And so there's a lot of different areas that you can get information from. There'll be more of that in the future. But right now, yeah, the main thing to do is, I think, interaction with people and interaction with the books, which I think the shows and the local stores would be the best thing for that.
Yep, because I mean that's one of the questions that I was going to ask is if someone goes out and gets their Overstreet grading criteria and they start to look at their books, like how do they know that the grade that they are assigning to that book is correct? And kind of what I'm hearing you say, much like you did in the restoration video, is do your own research, expose yourself as much as possible to people that may be a little bit more knowledgeable about you, touch as many books, ask as many questions. I'm kind of hearing the same thing here. Is that fair?
Yeah, and that's a broad overview. I mean, really, as you become acquainted with grading, it becomes more and more finite because there's so many different kinds of defects. And there's over 100 different defects that we identify. And each one affects a book differently. And then when you factor several in at once, then it becomes even more complicated, especially as the grade gets lower. So, you can't really encapsulate that in one book or one place or one visit or one show. Has to happen over time. So, people can get a general idea of what a VG looks like or a 4.0 or a 6.0 or a 9.0. But, you really have to become acquainted with all the different defects and how they affect and how they interact with each other.
Yep.
So it's a long process of learning grading.
Yep, fair enough. And so when you approach or when we approach grading, what is the proper way to do it? Does every book essentially start at like a 10? And then based upon the defects that are seen, right? You just identified there's at least 100 or so defects. Does the grade tick down from there? Or do you look at the book and automatically put the book in a couple of categories, high, medium, low, high grade, medium grade, low grade, and then adjust it from there based upon what you're seeing? Like, how do you do that part of it?
That's exactly right. Yeah. If you're dealing with a high grade book, use the subtractive method, which you start at 10.0. Obviously, most books are 9.8 or down. So, once you become a fairly seasoned collector, grader, you can pretty much quickly assume, all right, well, this book's got this defect. It's not going to go higher than 9.4. And then you start the subtraction process from there. And that's part of the subtraction process is understanding how each individual defect affects a grade. So like, for instance, the number of spine stress lines that break color, the length of a crease, cover tanning, the presence of, like a little color missing or tear. Those little things that affect high grades, if you can quantify those or learn to quantify those, you can quickly use the subtraction method to arrive at a grade. But when you're talking about mid grades and low grades, then it's more like the other thing you were talking about, where you kind of take the book out, eyeball it, and you land on a grade range in your head. You pull it out, because you can't use the subtraction method when you're dealing with 20 different defects that range in all kind of wear. So the best thing to do is just eyeball it and say, okay, this looks kind of like a 4.0 or maybe a 6.0, give or take. And then once you have that, then you start to kind of assess all the defects on the book. You're looking for the worst defects, so you may have a book that has some creasing and some tears, but maybe it has the cover's detached. So immediately you know that the cover detached, the determining defect on the grade, and let's say that starts at 4.0. So then now you've already, you've got it to 4.0, and then you work way down from there. And a lot of it in the lower grades is going to be more of an art than a science. So you can't really use the subtraction method with those. It's more of I'm so familiar with the grading process that the grade just pops into your head, and then you just kind of fine tune it over the next several seconds. And seasoned graders can usually nail a grade down within 10, 20 seconds.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know much about grading. And I have a lot of people that will send me photos of books, and they'll ask me, Reggie, what do you think of this grade? And typically what I do is I'll pop open my computer and try to find books that have already been graded by somebody. And I'll try to bounce the books against one another to kind of figure out what the grade might be. That's kind of because I'm not a grader, and through the comparison method, that helps me a little bit be able to give people a little bit of direction. But I think what you just offered up in terms of the subtraction method, grouping them and the mid and low tier, and then adjusting, I think that's advice that people can actually put into action,
Yeah.
Speaking, so you mentioned detached covers. Someone specifically asked me a question about detached covers. And so let's say that you do have a book with a detached cover. Does that book automatically get like a green label? Is it automatically like a 4.0, like you cited in your example? Can you talk a little bit more about detached covers just for a moment?
Sure, yeah. Detached cover typically starts at about 4.0, or it starts at 4.0. And then all the other defects bring it down. So, if you have a book that's already at 4.0 and then the cover's attached on top of that, it's probably going to be a little lower, like a 3.5 or maybe a 3.0. Mm-hmm. So that's, now as far as qualifying goes, we do have the option to qualify those. We qualify basically for detachments, missing parts, and signatures. So a detached cover can be qualified, but typically we don't qualify books unless the difference in the qualified grade and the universal grade are large. So if a book's like a 4.5, we're not going to give it a qualified 4.5 if it's going to be a 3.5 otherwise. There's only a 2-point difference there. Typically it would have to be like maybe an 8.0 or better, something like that. So we've got cutoffs for each qualifier that determines for the graders when they should qualify something, when they shouldn't.
So what I'm hearing, and I just want to play it back to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, because that was nuanced, right? There is the potential for a book with a detached cover to show up as either a blue label or a green label. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yeah. The only time it's always green is if it's married parts, or wrong parts. So like somebody's married a page, but it's the wrong page, which is essentially the same thing. But yes, otherwise attachments, missing parts, and signatures they all fall on the grade scale, and then we make a determination whether we're going to qualify or not. Because some people, they would rather have a 9.4 qualified than a 7.0, because of a pop staple or a signature.
And we do have people that will send their books back or specifically request, I want this in a universal label, and so the grade will be affected, or I want this in a qualified green label and the grade's affected.
That's super helpful because my buddy Luke, Undead Mousy, who is in the room right now, actually sent me that question because he had some confusion around. Sometimes I see a detached label that is blue, and sometimes I see it that is green, and it depends. Is basically what the answer is. He's not seeing something wrong. He's seeing it depends upon the book and what's been requested by the submitter. Yeah. Right.
And I see somebody printing errors. Yeah, I mean, there's some subtleties, especially in the modern side. We give a little bit more frequently for a few different things things on that because you're dealing with high grades more on that end. So you've got a lot of books that are structurally 9/8, but yeah, they may have a printing error or again, like a signature that wasn't witnessed or, one defect that just brings it down like a pop staple. So you'll see more variances in, or different kinds of varying qualified labels on the modern side, but typically on the vintage side, it's going to be structural stuff like detachments and missing parts.
Very good, very good. So I want to give a quick shout out to Closet Geek and also Discovery Bay Comics for their very generous super chat. So thank you guys for that. So my buddy Tina had a question here, and it goes to the point that you just raised a second ago about slightly different standards, if you will, for modern books versus older books. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And maybe let me get a little more specific. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the grading criteria, is the grading criteria apply evenly to modern books and older books, or are you making certain adjustments based upon what you're looking at?
No, it's equal across the board. The differences that I think people see are usually have to do with things that are associated with printing defects. So printing defects on a Golden Age book are very different than the ones that took place in the 60s, Silver Age, and even today. I mean, today we're seeing a whole bunch of new printing defects. I think we made in the last chat how the quality of paper has gone down. So we've actually had to sometimes actually create grading curves for a particular book that came out this week, that every copy's got some kind of ink smear on it. So in terms of grading criteria for those are treated a little differently than a Silver Age book, where we may be more forgiving on distribution ink across the top, or on Golden Age books for like a bindery tear or a miscut. So so in that regard, grading standards are a little different, but they're unique to those eras. But in terms of like regular handling, where splits and tears and creases and all that, it's the same across the board.
That is super helpful. So thank you for that. Because I remember I was concerned about Amazing Spider-Man 800, right? That 80-page book with every copy had a bindery tear. And I went to shops and they let me look through their diamond boxes to find one that wasn't, and there weren't any. So I was very concerned about sending that book in because I wasn't sure how you guys were going to treat it. And then I started seeing 9/8 with bindery tears, which gave me comfort that you guys were making the adjustment. So I think it's helpful for people to know that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that you alluded to, and I want to back up just a little bit because we're going to go down these paths and we're going to kind of back up as the opportunity presents itself. You mentioned that there was potentially 100 defects that could be seen with a book. Are you looking at those defects? Are they additive, right? So are you adding defects on top of defects, or does it get to a point where you're like, this is a 3 and it's got a ton of stuff wrong, but we're just going to stick it at 3? Like, how do you manage 100 defects for a given book?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think it goes back to the art thing. If you don't see a serious just trio that's full of creases and full of stains and tanning and maybe a pop staple or some tears, but you don't have one particular defect like a coupon out or a completely split spine or half split spine, then it's more of you're kind of eyeballing it. It's hard to describe and put into words, but you can take a book out if you know what you're doing, and you could just look at it and within a few seconds go, it's a 3.0. I mean, it doesn't look like, it's not gonna look like a 3.5 in the holder. I think 2.5 is too tough on it. Yep. And there's really no quantifying at all. You've eliminated the fact that there's any major defects that you have to consider. Because if you had like a 3.0 or a 3.5 with a coupon out, let's say you had 2 coupons out that measured 4x4, then you'd have to stop and actually we have to reference our standards to see exactly how those missing coupons would affect a 3.0 and then bring it down from there. But if you don't have anything like that, then it's just a matter of just kind of eyeball.
So
really just come.
Sorry, I cut you off. There is serious technical issues going on, but we're gonna power through. So okay. Let's say that I'm in a comic shop or I'm at a con and I pop a book open. And to the point that you just made, I'm flipping through the book, I'm counting the pages, it's looking good, right? And I get to a page and the coupon's gone. Mm-hmm. What impact does that coupon have on that book from a grading perspective? And does it matter whether that coupon affects the story or not? Is that taken into account when I am assigning a grade to a book that I have?
It doesn't affect the grade whether it affects a page or a coupon. We do note it differently in the label. We'll say affects story or does not affect story, but a missing part's a missing part. That being said, actually, it's off the margins. That does have less impact than if it does affect, ads or art. As far as like how that affects grade, it probably would be too lengthy to sit here and explain. It's a scale. We have sliding scales for a lot of defects like that. So for instance, if you have a 7.0 with a missing coupon 2x2, it might bring it down to a 3.5. If it's a 3x3 coupon, it might be a 3.0. If you've got a 4.0 with a missing coupon, it might be, 1.8. The size, it depends on the size, depends on the grade of the book. So yeah, it really varies, but typically like a missing coupon, like a Marvel value stamp missing out of a Hulk 181, it's probably the most common thing we get. That usually cuts off. Yeah, that cuts off at about 3.5. So, anything that is higher than like 6.0, we would consider qualifying, maybe a little lower. And because otherwise the book's going to get a 3.5 or down. Yep.
That's super helpful for my buddy, Sestro Elemento 93 had that specific question. Shout out to Bueller and WRX Comics for those generous super chats as well. So I'm in the shop. I'm making the adjustments. Let me back up. So you've alluded to a guide a couple of times. And my guess is that the guide that you're referring to is not necessarily the Overstreet guide or grading criteria. It's more of an internal document that is used by CGC. Is that a correct statement for me to make?
Our grading standards are close to Overstreet. I think, when we opened back in 2000, that was the standards that everybody used. And over time, over the past 19 years, we've tweaked a few areas, and it's simply because, we're actually in the business of grading, books, and we graded 5 million books. So we've seen things that, most people don't ever see. And so we've had to take things into consideration. So, putting something that's kind of been, theory-based and then practiced by dealers actually into a working model where people are going to work every day and grading books. There's, we have actually got standards down, and in some subtle ways they probably differ, but generally speaking, they're pretty close to Overstreet. I wouldn't say there's any major differences that I can think of.
That is super helpful, because I can't tell you how many questions I've received about what is CGC standard, right? And it sounds like the standard is rooted in Overstreet, but you are making adjustments for the practical application of the standard versus the theoretical standard that has been developed. And again, if you grade 5 million books, you learn a thing or two that should count for something, right?
Yeah, there's like, we'll get a 9.8 in with a 1/8 inch piece of tape on it. I think maybe Overstreet may mention somewhere where there's a cutoff for tape, but there's not really that doesn't break it down to how tiny the tape is or how great we'll give a 9.8 with a tiny piece of tape. We may give it a 9. And so something like that's just a situation that, those are nuances you really can't cover in depth in something like a, tree grading guide.
You could, but no one would read it because it would be way too detailed or something like that. So one of the questions that I want to kind of get to, and you alluded to this earlier when you were talking about modern books and those modern books being higher in grade just because they're modern books and they're freshly coming out, right? So can you, and I've done actually a video on this, but my buddy Evan Tube Raw and Vu Hong had a question about the differences between a 9.9, a 9.8, and a 9.6. Can you talk a little bit about the hair's difference that might exist between those three grades?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. It's going to be kind of like the coupon question. Just generally speaking, a 10.0 is perfect. It doesn't have any defects at all, obviously. A 9.8 can have 1 or 2 small defects, like one little spine stress line, maybe 2 that break color, a rounded corner. The biggest thing that affects the difference between 9.8s and 10s are going to be the spine. Printing defects aside, printing defects is a huge thing for, say, modern comics. You don't really see anything above 9.8 when you get back before 1980s,
Right.
or maybe even the 90s. So really, what we're talking about, the difference between 9.8 and 10.0 for moderns is going to be printing defects is going to be a big thing. But as far as handling where it goes, it's the spine. It's the spine stress lines. It's the way the staples are set, if there's anywhere around the prongs, and especially the top and bottom, the corners of the spines, which become blunted so easily. When I say blunted for a 9, or 10, it's got to be, just razor sharp. That's typically where the difference lies. And then, to a lesser degree, page quality. I don't think we allow off-white to white in 10. I think it's cream off-white goes up to 9.6. 9.9s and 10.0s, I believe, need to be white or off-white to white. So, we got page quality designation for that as well. So, but yeah, it's a very, very tiny little subtle thing in that grade range. So,
and just to be clear, when you are grading a book, you are essentially evaluating not just the cover of the book, the spine of the book, but you're also taking into account page color as well. That also will either help or hinder the grade that a book gets. Yes?
Yes, correct. Question earlier, addressing brittle books. And we're actually
writing down questions for us to answer.
Yeah.
Knowing we're going to do that, but I got the important ones that I've been seeing.
Yeah, we're reading these questions, and I tell you, there's a lot of things in here I can't talk about because there's a lot of answers to these questions that, well, they will be answered soon because we've already got things in the works addressing a lot of these things. But the brittle designation, we're working on that as well to actually expand that to, possibly, because the question was basically they're books with cream off-white pages where, one area is brittle, one small area, maybe like a corner is brittle and, or slightly brittle. And we're reassessing whether those books should actually be slightly brittle or maybe possibly cream off-white with some kind of notation of the brittleness in the notes. So that being said, so you said as far as page quality, page quality basically becomes a factor in grading when you get below cream to off-white, with the exception of 9.8s. Light tan off-white cuts off around 8.5. Slightly brittle around 6.5, 3.5. So those are the worst page designations. Those are the ones that actually have grade cutoffs for them. So, and then of course, with brittle and slightly brittle, if the brittle books are split, we get books that are brittle and every wrap is split or half the wraps are split. That's a structural defect that will go beyond the 3.5 brittle designation, actually be treated as detached or split wraps, which could bring the grade way down from there.
You said a lot in that last 30 seconds. That was a lot into there. I'm gonna have to watch that on replay. Brittany, you were taking notes. So let's do this. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Matt Thanatos for that super chat. Why don't we do maybe 2 or 3 of the questions that you've captured on your side so that we get a chance to acknowledge the people that are dropping these wonderful comments into the comment section.
All right, I apologize that I didn't write down who put the questions up, but are we going to Planet Comic-Con? No, we are not. Are we going to Denver Comic-Con? Yes, we are. Do you need a membership to submit to us? If you want to mail your books into our office, yes. If you want to drop them off at a show, nope, free membership will do it, and that's totally fine. Doesn't cost anything. Bottom staple, if a bottom staple is detached from a cover, what kind of grade would that get, and would it get qualified?
Yeah, if it's like a 9.8, very high grade, you're looking at a 7.0, possibly a 7.5 for full detachment. Half detachments are going to be a little higher than that. We typically qualify around that, 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8. The detached staple will consider qualifying that, because otherwise the grade's going to be a 7.5 or a 7.0.
If a book has a missing back cover, will it get a green label?
No, we don't qualify for missing parts of covers. Tons, mastheads torn off, large chunks, back covers missing, front cover. No, those are all treated. Those are given universal labels. So missing back cover or front cover will get a 0.5. If it's missing the full cover, it'll get a no grade coverless designation.
Batman Dam books, a lot of them have been getting 9, 9s, and 10s. One of the main reasons that's happening is because it has great cover stock. The book was just made very well, and there was no shortcuts taken on the kind of paper that they used to print those books. So because of higher quality printing, those books are getting better grades. Mm-hmm. Someone asked why we won't do verified signatures, because other companies do it. A lot of people do verified signatures. CGC won't do verified signatures because it's not 100% accurate. Even the best ones, they get close, but they're not 100% accurate. And we feel that if we encapsulate just one inaccurate signature in our holders, it brings the entire program in question. And so we just won't do it. We're not going to, plans to. The signature series program will run based off eyewitnesses only.
And to be honest with you, I didn't even know the answer to that question, and I answer that question all the time because there is so much credibility at stake should you get one wrong.
That's it. It takes one wrong one to knock down years and years and years of building up your reputation and building up this program. And so we just aren't interested in branching out into that.
It makes perfect sense. Matt, aka Thanatos, I've made you a moderator, so if you can help me out with the chat, brother, I would appreciate it. Comic Head 84, shout out to you for that super chat. I appreciate it. And one last question before we move on to section 2. So I'm in the shop. I'm thinking about looking at buying this book, or I'm at home and I'm evaluating this book because I'm looking to sell it, or I have this book and I'm thinking about sending it in for grading. And I'm trying to grade it. I've kind of categorized it. I've looked at the overstreet. I've made some adjustments. I kind of sort of think I have it. One of the things I want to ask is, should I be looking at this book from various angles? Should I be looking at it in a light? Should I get a magnifying glass to look at it under a magnifying glass? Like, are there things that I should do beyond just getting the book and staring at it, flipping through it, and looking at the back? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Before he does that, as somebody who also doesn't grade books, doesn't know anything about grading, and all my knowledge has been from what I've either seen in the grading room or learned from a grader. I think the reason why he keeps stressing that you have to see the book, hold the book, touch the book is because there is just so much that you can't see in photos. People send photos all the time and they're like, can you have a grader look at this? And can they do that? There's just shine, feel, and just stuff that can't be seen in a photo that can be seen in a naked eye. And when you watch Matt grade a book, the first thing he does is he slides his thumb down the spine. You can't do that in a photo or something, or looking at something. You have to actually feel it in person. So I'm not trying to grade the books, but looking over people's shoulders, I can see that they do hand them, they'll hand them back and forth, and it's tangible process.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that's that to get an accurate grade. Now, if to get ballpark grades,
that's a different story.
That's a different. Yeah, we can looking at a front and back cover scan, you do ballpark grade, and most people know, they accept the fact that if there's something wrong on the inside, they're not going to hold us responsible for that. But yeah, what Brittany's saying is totally right. Ultimately holding the book, but lighting is the most important thing. Magnifying glasses magnifiers are, I'd say those are more important for restoration. Looking at staples and stuff. But if you just have a good light, and light is critical. If you can't, if you're at a comic show and the lights are kind of dim, it's very difficult. So if you just have a good light, that's all you need. And there's different ways with the light. You can look at the book. Obviously, the direct light is shining on it. But if you turn the book up sideways like this, and with the light shining down on it, if you're holding it like this, the light coming down on it, then it's going to create shadows in where the defects are. This is actually really important for looking at books and holders for press candidates, particularly in the back cover, the white, because the whites that produce shows. So when you turn the book on its side under the light like this, you can see all kind of dents, bends, creases that you may not see directly. You turn the book 90 degrees, same thing. Front covers are hard to see because of color. So in that case, what you do is you kind of then turn it at an angle where you have a reflection and you have more of a raking light. And this is also true for if it's not in a holder. But if either way, when you tilt the book, you're creating like a mirror surface because the light's reflecting off the cover. And again, you get a similar effect where all of the imperfections in the paper are going to come to light. And so you can see color touch that way. You can see creases that might be hidden. All kind of things. And so the light used different ways is critical when assessing covers. As far as interior pages go, they're dull. They're not. They don't have a glossy finish, so the light effect doesn't work with those. But you really don't need that. When it comes to pages, you're just looking at the color of the paper, which again, the type of light you use is critical. You want to use more of a white light because if you use more of an incandescent light, a warm light, it's going to make the pages look darker. So you could actually, assign a lower page quality. But you're looking at pages, interior pages. You're looking for tears, missing pieces, just structural defects. So light's really not as critical in the interior of the book.
I'm not sure what made Brittany dance there. Maybe it was the hello from TJ Watt. I don't know.
I love TJ Watt, boo.
She loves to do that.
I do.
She's dancing all of a sudden. I'm like, what is going on? So one additional question before we transition is, there was that card that you could get. What was it? The owl card?
Yeah.
Do you recommend people get those? And if so, do you know where people can get those? Because I have never seen one.
Yeah, they probably sell on eBay for $100 a piece. I haven't seen one in years. I maybe have one in a box somewhere at home. I don't remember how useful it is. I think the problem was that it had maybe 4 or 5 shades on it. It's kind of like, it's difficult with page color because there's so many different kinds of variations. There's pages that are completely one color. There's pages that are white in the middle, brown on the edges. There's pages that are brown at the top, white on the bottom. And it would take, you would need like an owl card that's like 10 feet by 10 feet with like 1,000 colors on it. And
you just run around, match it up all the way around this pool tie table thing.
And the worst is that you can't see the page quality in a holder. So, unlike a grade, assessing grade, learning CGC's grading standards, you really can't do that with page quality standards because they're encapsulated. So, so we're actually working on releasing something similar, like the owl card down the road. Not a card, but information that's going to be helpful to collectors to show the different kind of page qualities.
You guys have a lot in the works, and I'm definitely excited to hear it because you're always like, there's something coming. There's something coming. I am excited to hear what things are. So I know before you guys spoke about some educational things that you guys had in the works, and I'm guessing that that's still essentially what you guys are alluding to. So shout out to Comic Books NYC again for that very wonderful super chat donation. So now in this second section, I want to transition a little bit. And even though we've been talking about CGC's services already, I want to spend some more time talking about it because Brittany needs more screen time. So let's go ahead and make this transition. So we've already spoken about my first question, which is around the differences between the Overstreet grading criteria and what CGC does, because that was one of the biggest questions that people had. We talked about the fact that this grading standard that you have is applied the same to both modern books and older books. So we've kind of addressed that. How, and you've already spoken about this a little bit, but I want to do it a little bit better. When a book is submitted to CGC for grading, can we talk a little bit about what that intake procedure looks like? And I'm certainly not looking for trade secrets, but what I'm looking for is to have people better understand your processes.
Mm-hmm. There's not really big time trade secrets in terms of our receiving process and how the books go from you guys sending them in to getting to the graders. So whether we're getting them through the mail or they're coming in from a show, they're coming in boxed up. So we have a team, a whole entire room of receivers who take a box off a cart, open it under video camera, take out the contents of the box, check the submission form versus what books are there. And at that point in time, if there's any discrepancies, they either need to contact the customer or let customer service know to contact the customer. If a book is missing, if there's too many, if anything is wrong before the receiving process takes place, we say, hey, something is happening here and it's not correct. If everything matches up, they actually go about receiving the book or the books multiple. So they type in the number, make sure the account information is correct, the shipping information is correct, everything matches what the person put on the paper versus what books are actually there. And then from there, the books go to the verifying team. The verifying team actually checks that the book that you say you sent in to us is what that book is inside the indicia of the book. They don't do this actually by opening it. We have a whole, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a whole list of every book that's ever been graded by us that they can verify what it is without actually touching it. So there's no handling that's been happening on the books yet. Okay. The first time a book is actually touched by a human in our building, it's by the graders. So the books aren't handled at all until they're physically in the grading room. They stay in bags and boards. They get boxed. When they are received and verified, the books get barcoded with the invoice number, and the paperwork that says who those books belong to is removed.
So it's de-identified.
Yeah, everything is now tied to this invoice number.
And I just want to be clear. When you say that it's de-identified, it won't matter whether it comes from me or TJ Watson. It won't matter if it comes from a show or a large comic shop. It is de-identified, period.
When the books are received and verified, whether they came from New York Comic Con, whether they came from the CEO of our company, whether they're my books, whether they're your books, whether they are part of a massive submission or one single modern book, they all go in identical looking boxes, color coded by tiers with their invoice numbers.
Very good.
So they go into so we have loopers that move everything throughout the building so it stays on time.
You have what?
Loopers.
Loopers. Okay.
Loopers.
I think that's a general term, isn't it? Loopers.
Oh.
We didn't make that,
I've
did we?
never heard that word in my life.
Yeah, maybe we make that up.
Our coin side calls them loopers.
Yeah, it's a
we
coin
call
thing.
them loopers.
It's a coin thing. I don't know.
They loop around all day long,
So,
moving
yes.
things
Yeah,
to the
something
different
else we got
rooms.
from the coin industry. Yeah.
To maximize the time that the graders are actually grading books, we have people bring them the books, take the books done that have been graded, and take them into encapsulation. So that basically are keeping our turn times accurate, feeding them what books they should be actually getting, making sure that the vintage guys are getting the vintage books, et cetera, et cetera. They go into encapsulation. Labels are then printed. They get encapsulated. After they're encapsulated, they're married back up with their original paperwork, and then they go to shipping.
Very nice.
That's kind of the whole loop.
So let's say that I didn't sleep well one night, and I'm one of the people that gets the book initially. I'm under the video camera. I drop a box of books. What happens? Let's say that I drop that bundle of books that was so carefully packaged. What happens?
So so let's say you drop the box of books, and let's say for the sake of this example, there's 20 books inside there, and you drop the entire box on the corner.
Whoops.
And we're going to pretend that the books were packed, so a bunch of them had some impact damage done to them.
Yep.
At that point in time, we'd pull the books out. They'd be taken to a grader to see how severe the damage is, whether pressing will reverse any of the damage that's been done. And then the customer is contacted and just what took place. What do they want to do? At that point in time, if we drop the box, we would either reimburse them for all of the books that they submitted that were damaged. We would offer the option of pressing them completely free of charge, and then continuing with the grading. We would present basically any options that were available to the customer and let them choose which one made them feel the best about the submission.
Yep. To essentially make the customer as whole as possible based upon what's happened.
Right.
You just gave us the whole process from intake, which I think is wonderful. Can we talk a little bit about how many graders are on staff? And there's reasons for all these questions, which I know that you know. How many graders are on staff? How many graders touch a given book? And I think that's it for the moment. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it vague exactly how many we have, but we have a bunch. We have a lot more than we started with. We have a bunch, and they're broken up into teams. We have a very intricate team system, whether it's modern or vintage, the values of the books, the kinds of books, variants, all that stuff. Not really variants. That's kind of more of a receiving thing. But in terms of the number of graders, we have the most graders on the high val stuff. And as it goes down, we have multiple graders on all books, but we'll have as many as 5 or 6 on a express walkthrough. Standard we may have 3 or 4. So because just obviously the more eyes on a book, the less chance there's we're going to miss something or have an incorrect or inaccurate grade, I should say. So less of an issue. Grading is not when you're talking about moderns, for instance. you know, a lot of the books that are coming in are the difference is it a 9.8 or a 9.6 or 9.4? You know, and so there's less of a need to have multiple people looking at books like that. So, you know, so yeah, but as far as the vintage goes, definitely more of a need for more eyes on the books.
Okay. All right. And so it's fair to say that regardless of the type of book that is sent in, at least a couple of people will touch that book before that grade is assigned. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And again, there's reasons for all of these questions, right?
Well, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah. So my buddy Big Will actually asked me a question. And he likes to say, I think it's, I have arrived whenever Big Will comes into a room. He's a big guy, so I like to give him his due. He asked a couple of questions about writing on covers versus writing on splash pages and how you guys decide to give something a green label if there's writing on the cover versus a blue label for things that are written inside when you're not verifying the signature of either one. Can you talk a little bit about that logic so that Will and others out there that have similar questions like this can appreciate it?
Sure. Yeah. Signatures on interiors have virtually no effect on grade. You know, basically because it's not on the cover, it's not visible. Now, if somebody scribbled their name multiple times on many pages, or they've, you know, scribbled to face the page, with, you know, that's going to affect the grade. But if we're just talking about a signature, you know, if you have like a, you know, an artist that signed his name on the bottom of page 1, that has no effect. And we will mention that on the label if it's legible. Now on the cover, totally different story. It depends on the size of the signature, the placement, and the number of signatures and the grade of the book.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes there's a very small signature that has very little impact on the book. But because if it's not verified, we have to treat it like a defect depending on how big it is, because it's basically like, you know, a name on a cover, which we would do the same thing on a Golden Age comic if somebody had written their name across the top. You know, if we had a 9.8 Golden Age book, you know, and someone had written a name, you know, across the top in ink, we're not going to give that a 9.8. So the same logic applies to the modern books. You know, as far as like the grade goes, it could be anywhere. It could be a small signature may affect it down to 9.4, 9.2, all the way down to 8.0 or even lower if you've got, you know, huge signature, 2 or 3 or 4 signatures on the cover. So, you know, but we don't really want to treat, you know, celebrity signatures as defects because it was intentionally put there, and in a lot of people's eyes, it adds value. That's why we qualify those, because we want to give we still want to grade the book as it is without that signature being considered a defect. So you know, that's why I think the qualified grade is very popular among modern collectors in those situations where they have books that don't have verified signatures.
Can I answer a question that somebody paid for?
Go for it.
They had a question about reholdering older books, what that process is like. Do the books get checked again? When we get any reholders in, especially if damage has been done, like if it's obvious that the slab was dropped or crushed or cracked, those books are looked at by a grader again. If you're sending your book in just for a regular reholder because you just want to change it out, it's been a while, or maybe you have like scratches on the holder, but it's obvious that no damage has been done, those for the most part still also get looked. If it's an older high value book, they're also going to get looked at. So they all get looked at again. If there's any discrepancies or the graders don't feel like it is still the grade that it is, we contact the customer and we let them know what kind of options are available, whether it be pressing, or we let them know that it's going to get downgraded. Yep. But when that always is looked at, especially for vintage books, high val books, and any books that look like they have any kind of damage.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want any books out there in holders that.
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
That's
you
the
just
bottom
can't
line.
have a book in a holder where it's not the grade that it says it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So one quick question here from someone is, and I think I know the answer to this. So I have a book, I don't have a membership, and I just want you guys to clean it and press it.
I've seen them say that you have to have 15 books minimum. That's not true. That's only for quick press, which is like a less expensive option for pressing. You can send in a single book for pressing. It is $12, and then it can get graded after that, and the grading is $20.
But I'm asking a slightly different question, right? So I think what you just—
Oh, if you want it returned raw, you can do that too.
No.
You can send in a book for pressing?
No.
Go
I
ahead.
have no membership. I just want you to clean and press a book for me. That's it. And send it back to me raw with no membership. Will you do that?
At the
Yes.
show, yeah. If you turn it at the show, yeah. If you turn it at the show, you don't need a membership, and then we press it. Yeah, we return books raw.
Everyone needs a free membership.
Yes. Okay.
Even at the show, you'd at least have to have a free membership.
I gotta tell you, Reggie, though, it's really, really rare that anything that goes through CCS doesn't get graded. It's really rare.
No. And I'm not asking for myself. That is a question that someone asked in the chat, and I've actually received that question several times from other people.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why you would send it. I'm guessing send it or have CCS press it, but not get it graded as well. But
yeah, there are some good reasons.
Okay.
In fact, I'm actually surprised we don't get more of that because
Really
something.
don't.
Yeah, it's like I go to like dealers' booths and I go through their boxes and they've got stuff there that they're not going to get graded. But boy, it would look a lot better in their boxes than dry clean, And so more people don't do that. I don't know why.
So a free membership, and I can access CCS at a con, but I cannot submit books via mail with that free membership.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. That is helpful. Let's talk a little bit about date stamps, right? Because we talked about signatures on books and how they add value. How are date stamps treated? Because I think that date stamps are essentially grandfathered in. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, date stamps are not, they're not printing defects, but they're distribution markings, we'll call them. They're kind of like signatures in some regard that they're cool, they add value, particularly with the Golden Age books, where they're actually they're used for identifying pedigrees.
Mm-hmm.
So Golden Age books are a lot more common. They're actually useful. Assuming that they're not egregious in size, they're usually not. They're usually small. They have little or no impact on grade, and collectors of Golden Age books are very forgiving of them. But as time went on, those things kind of disappeared. So by the 60s, especially by the 70s, as the newsstand, the distribution service moved away from newsstands and into comic stores. They virtually disappeared by the 70s and 80s. So it really, as far as grading goes, it's kind of a non-issue overall because you really only find them on the older books, and they're usually not really that big of a deal. That being said, if you do have a big date stamp and it's in the front cover right in the middle of somewhere, yeah, it could affect a grade, like a 9.8. It might affect it, but typically not. Now, I don't confuse this with like name stamps and design stamps and things that come afterwards that readers would put on their books, which is very common. Those we definitely take off. Size is always a factor, just like signatures. If something is on the cover where it's distribution ink, a stamp, writing, anything, it's going to affect the grade if it's large.
Very good. That is super helpful. So how are you guys on time? Because we're really at the 1 hour mark. Can you guys go a little longer, or do we need to?
Yeah, no, we're fine. We can keep going.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the fee structure for grading. Brittany, this is all you. People sometimes struggle with how much it's going to cost a book, and I can't tell you how many times I've actually jumped on my computer for someone and actually dropped their book into the system to give them a price estimate of what it's going to cost. Can you talk a little bit about the fee structures for grading of books?
Yes. First of all, let me just say that it's difficult even for our employees to understand our fee structure. So nobody should feel bad about not understanding how we charge out for books. Everything is based on the value of the book, and the only tier that has anything to do with the age of the book is the modern tier. Every other tier is solely based off what you value that book at. We don't place any values on books at all. So the customer must tell us what they want us to insure their book for while we have it, which is usually the fair market value. So books that are valued at $200 or less that are 1975 to the present can go under modern. If a book is valued between $200 or less, and it's after, like, pre-1975. So an older book, it can go under the value tier. If a book is $400 or less, doesn't matter the age, it can go economy. So, and then if a book is between $400 and $1,000, doesn't matter the age, it goes standard. And if it's between $1,000 and $3,000, it's express. If it's above $3,000, it's walkthrough, and it's 3% of the fair market value, whatever the customer values it at. So the tier prices are set prices, and then they're discounted based off of your account with us. Whether you have an associate account, you get 5% off. A premium account, 10% off. An elite account, 15% off, and a dealer account would be 20% off.
I always recommend people go with the premier account because it costs $150. You get a credit for $150.
Yeah, it's free.
It makes it free. That is the one that I always recommend.
Right.
So when you say it is based upon the customer's value of the book, let's talk a little bit about that. Are you talking about that declared value section when you are entering the book? That's what you're tying it to?
Yes.
Okay.
That determines what you pay for the book.
I may need to go back and redo my video because I can't remember what I said about that, but I need to go back and look at it. So when you talk about the declared value of the book, should they be to the point of this thing, looking at that book, evaluating the potential grade of that book, figuring out through Go Collect or GPA what the value of that book is once graded, to be able to drop that into the declared value field in the portal? Is that what the course of action should be?
Well, no. No, not necessarily. So a book, say your dream book was the Hulk 181. You wanted it your whole life, and you finally found one, and you bought it for $800. Would you become, you could put on your submission form, I want this insured for $800. That's what I paid for it. That's what I would want back if something were to happen to the book. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe you want like $5,000 back if anything happened to your Hulk 181 because it's precious to you. It's whatever you want us to insure it for, and it's what we're responsible for while we currently have that book in our possession. And it's important that people know that, because what you pay for your grading is based off the value of the book, and people will try to say that their books are worth less, so they'll pay less in grading fees. But it's really important to know that if anything were to happen, which we very rarely do have incidents here, but we're humans and it does, we're liable for the value that's on that book. And that book, while it's here in our facility, is insured for the value that those people are putting on your books. So yes, you should go to eBay and see what they're selling for, but
yeah, I would. Let me add something to that. It's actually, there's a reason for valuing it correctly, and there's a reason for not going too high, and there's a reason for not going too low. Mm-hmm. You could put $5,000 on the $800 book if you want. But the problem with that is that you're going to pay a higher tier fee. And obviously, especially for the cheaper books, the fees, they constitute a percentage of the value of that book. So you want to make sure that you don't overpay, the fee. And now the book is, essentially you've got more into the book than you did before. So that's one reason. Of course, the flip side of that's what Brittany was saying, is that you don't want to undervalue it, because if something happens to the book, then you're only going to get back that amount. If somebody put $10,000 on a book that was worth $500 and it got damaged or lost, I don't think we're going to pay out $10,000. Yeah, I think that's too egregious. I think we'd have to call them out on that one. But the best thing to do is to just go ahead and do the best job you can. Try to get it as close to right as possible. GPA, all those other sources that you talked about, eBay, what you paid. Most people know. They know what it's worth. They know what they paid. Usually people who dig stuff out of the garage after 50 years, they're not going to know. We can always help those kind of people, but most people know, and they usually get it right. And if the grade happens to come back higher, then we bump will bump the CGC will bump the fee actually up, but that's only if it's like significantly higher. You know, if you sit in it for 800 and it ends up being worth 12 or 1300 bucks for you, we're not going to bump you to an express.
Yep.
You know, if it's like $800 and it comes out, you know, $2,000 or $1,800, then we would do that.
That's super helpful because that declared value section in the form, that is one of the areas where I get a lot of questions from people. Like, how do I complete this? What should I say? And I think you guys have given us a couple of tangible things to kind of consider. And I'm actually going to go back and look at my video to see if I need to reshoot another video to speak specifically to what we've talked about here to ensure I'm giving people the right advice. So thank you for that. Brittany, at what point does a person's credit card get charged? Because people often ask me, should I do a credit card? Should I do a debit card? And there seems to be a little bit of a lag with when the book is sent in versus when the charge is seen. Can you give us some context for that?
Yes. So if you are sending in a submission and it is getting pressed and then graded, it's going to get transferred to CCS first. And when it gets verified at CCS, it will be charged only the CCS fees. Then when it transfers back to CGC and it's received again on the CGC side, it gets charged CGC fee, unless it's a pre-screen invoice, because we don't know what we're going to actually grade until the graders look at it. Pre-screen invoices are charged when they are finalized.
Got it. So they're
charged on verified with CCS, received at CGC, and finalized for pre-screens.
Very good. So I want to back up just a little bit to grading and some other things. There is a grading team, and is that grading team separate from the encapsulation team, or are they the same individuals?
Oh no,
no.
Yeah, totally different departments. Yeah, receiving
all the departments.
Yeah, quality control, shipping, customer service, all separate.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, because that was also one of the questions, is whether people are playing dual roles, and it sounds like they are not. So I think that's wonderful. Brittany, have you captured any additional questions as it relates to like section 1 and section 2 before we move on to section 3? Is there anything that you've written down over there?
Yeah, someone asked if CCS could fix a pop staple and have it not be restoration.
No. I mean, no, not really. No, you can't fix a pop. Yeah, once it's popped, if it's fully popped, you know, it's not going to go back on. I mean, there's, you know, in some rare instances, you might be able to kind of tuck some paper under a staple, but that's a whole nother matter. You know, there was one question I actually saw that was interesting a while back, caught my eye. I've missed a lot of. I apologize because you guys are coming up with some great questions.
I know. I want to say too, if we don't answer all of them, everyone can feel free to email me their individual questions, and I guarantee you I will answer them.
Yeah.
So Brittany at cgccomics.com.
Or she'll bounce them off of me.
Or yes, but we'll get answers. So if we didn't answer them here in the thing, you can email me directly, and I promise we'll answer them.
Yeah. You are so brave for that, because they are going to take you up on that.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And if it's a crazy snide question, expect a very funny response.
I always tell people, severe.
Let me answer this question real quick.
Yeah.
The one here mentioned. So they said, when we're grading books, do we pay attention to the census and actually try to control the market based on what we've graded before?
That was weird.
It's a very good question. Very good question. Yeah. The answer is no, of course, we don't. You know, we just grade them as we see them. They're exactly what they are in front of us is what we grade them. We don't sit there and say, oh, there's too many 8.0s on the census, we can't give this an 8. You know, I mean, in fact,
we impartial.
Yeah, you know, we want the book to be the best it can be. We give the book the highest grade we can give it without being wrong. I mean, that's kind of, you know, our philosophy. We're not trying to keep grades down, keep grades low, constantly looking for feedback from dealers and collectors on, you know, our grading standards. You know, I remember the first Spidey 1498 we graded. We went, 15, 16 years, and a bunch of 9.6s had piled up. And I don't think I was fully aware that there was no 9.8s on the census there. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 issues left. There's no 9.8s, like a 28 and a couple others. And one day in the grading room, there was this one sitting in front of me, and I was like, oh my God, I think this is a 9.8, you know. And so passed it around. Everybody looked at it, you know, confirmed, yeah, that finally this book is a 9.8, and that was the very first one. So yeah, so it's actually kind of a celebration whenever we have stuff like that happen.
So shout out to whoever that person was that got that book.
Yeah.
Also, someone asked again about Planet Comic Con. We're not going to Planet Comic Con. I know it's on their website. We're not going. CGC will not be there.
Sorry.
If a facilitator, if there could be a facilitator that's going to take books on our behalf, but CGC will not be there.
Yep, very good. All right, so let's go ahead and transition into the third part. And this is a little juicy, right? It's a little juicy section.
Yeah, we're going to spend 2 minutes on this
late
section.
night. This is like the after show.
This is where we're going to give you answers to move on.
Late show.
Pass the beers. It's about to get interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So this is over during the first live stream. And I think during this live stream, people have been asking like questions about, are they going to answer this? Are they going to address this? People were sending me messages. Yes, we are finally going to get into some of the things that people have wanted to hear about. The first one on the list is in 1704. So Isaac Newton discovered this phenomenon of, I guess it was like, reflective light among two refractory light. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And he discovered it, and it was dubbed Newton rings. And so my question for you is, why have you guys not solved what Sir Isaac Newton broke in 1704?
Okay, so I'm going to handle Newton rings.
I'm going to chime in, though.
Yes.
I'll chime in.
So as you already explained, Newton rings are just what happens when two pieces of plastic touch and light refracts through them. You see that rainbowish. Yeah, it happens on really smooth, clear surfaces. So first things first, there is no oil. There's no substance there. It's merely an illusion that's caused by the light and the
optical illusion.
Yeah.
Or a visual thing.
Of the two plastics touching. So we've had this in our holders since our inception, and I think it was not as noticeable before because the inner wells that we were using were slightly tinted, and you couldn't see, they were there, but they just didn't, visually you couldn't see them as much because of the tint of the inner well. Our holders now using PETG and our archival outer plastic, they're just so clear that the Newton rings are just way more visible. So we've actually taken steps of creating more space within the well to almost completely reduce them on like 95% of the books we've seen. We've seen them
it's gone on most.
less.
It's still a little visible on a few.
Yeah.
I mean, our departments are all over. They've been all over it for a while. So, from our perspective, the problem is diminished. Now, the problem is that everybody has their own standards of what they consider acceptable in terms of Newton rings. I look at books, and like Brittany said, I've been dealing with CGC since they opened in 2000. It was always there in some form or another, and I never even noticed it really. It wasn't until a couple of years ago when it really came to the forefront, and it became a big thing. So, so now now it's one of those things that we have to, to address. So so we definitely got it down to gone or almost gone. But the challenge is just simply that we've got so little space to work with in there. And you've got fat books, golden age books, spine roll books, square bounds, all that stuff. And, the inner well and the outer well is so slick and clear, that you get that effect, which occurs in other things in other industries, that if they just barely touch in any area, then you kind of get that effect.
Yeah, and you can see them. You can push sometimes, maybe not on our newer slabs, but on the older ones that didn't show it as well, you can actually push on them and you can see it. You can create it and see it. And that's the case on our current slab.
Well, it's like an LED screen on
on your phone
or an ATM machine or whatever. You push on it, it gets that little, that's the effect, So,
but
we'll eventually lit completely.
But just
anyone in the chat, if you think that yours are that bad, email me. We'll talk. See what I can do.
Just to be clear, you guys are acknowledging that Newton rings exist, and you are working to minimize and or eliminate them in time.
Yeah, we have minimized them, and we're working to eliminate them completely.
There we go. All right. So speaking of light, one of the questions that came in from my buddy Kingpin Comics was around, will you guys ever do UV protection built into your slabs?
I guess we would consider it. Honestly, the only time, I mean, the issue with light is
they shouldn't be stored in light anyway.
Well, you know, the dealers. Yeah, I was going to say the dealers. You know, and ironically, the most valuable books end up on the walls at the shows. And then there are some collectors like to display their books at home. Now, the collectors at home, yeah, there you go, there you go. So, you know, you got, you know, I'm sure people take precautions with the lighting and making sure sunlight's not hitting it. The dealers, the shows don't really have as much of a luxury to do that. You know, it's something that, yeah, we would consider that, you know, sure. I mean, it's not as, I guess, pressing of an issue as, say, Newton rings.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's something we would, you know, yeah, I mean, that could certainly be a feature. If we could add that feature for a low cost to the product, then yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, so for me, like I've blacked out my window completely. That's over here. I have LED lights and even the lights that I use for the purpose of filming are LED so as to prevent anything from affecting the book. But UV protection is one of those things that has come up consistently from people. And for lots of reasons. I'm not going to speculate why and whether they should put their comics in light or not, but it is a great question, and I wanted to make sure that I gave you guys an opportunity to address that.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea.
Can I get a finder's fee? All right. Joking. I am joking. All right, so let's talk about consistency in grading, right? So we did not get an exact number of graders, and I respect that. But there are I think you said I can't remember. I want to say handfuls of graders.
500.
5 million.
Yeah, or 100. Yeah.
So can you guys talk a little bit about like how you ensure consistency across the different teams, right? Because you have people that are broken up into based upon dollar amounts. I'm guessing there's maybe some segmentation based upon year of book. How do you ensure, again, given that you also have 100 or so potential defects, that you have consistency from grader to grader and from grader to grader over time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, to start with, grader to grader over time is tough because that's an easy one to address because CGC in 2002 is different than it is now. And what I mean by that is not the graders, because believe it or not, our grading team from those early years is still almost entirely intact, minus 1 or 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got, you know, Paul Litch, Sean Caffrey, you know, Mark Haspel, Chris Friesen, Vince, Matt Dagan, Dave Kuyu. I mean, all those guys are still there. So that consistency is fine. Now, as I said before, you know, CGC, especially those early years, you know, are still, you know, getting their footing in terms of the standard. So, you know, and then also you've had, you know, just other changes going on in the company that, you know, you're going to see a little bit of that over time. So over time, yes, you are going to see some inconsistencies, especially if you're a seasoned grader. That being said, today, and actually for a while now, we do a lot of stuff to maintain consistency because that is just as paramount as our turn time. So the trying to strike that balance between quality and quantity in terms of our grading is critical. That is what we're all about. That is the name of the game. So one of the many things we do is we actually we run a grading test every week in the grading room.
Okay.
Readers blind grade a box of a few books, and those results are tallied at the end of the day and emailed out to everybody to see where they fell into that thing. I do the same exact grading test for the dealers once a year in San Diego too. I give them a sample of books. The dealers grade them all blindly. Our graders back here grade them all blindly, and then we release the results to the dealers. Just the dealer grades. Yeah, we keep the grader grades internal. So we do that. We also run reports each week that actually compare the grades of all the books that were graded the week before of all the graders, comparing them. So we actually can tell what's it called?
Like the trends.
Variances. Yeah, trends. You know, and see if you have And then of course we have our grading standards that we've actually got down on paper. So you know all the graders are familiar with that. So you know the ones that you can quantify. Some you can't. Someone in here it keeps asking about foxing. Foxing and stains and tanning are probably the most difficult thing to grade because you can't quantify those because like page quality.
Size and other things that it could affect.
Yeah, there's like foxing. There's all kinds of different ways foxing affect paper. So, you know, so those are hard to quantify, but we can quantify the lengths of creases and tears and spine splits, the amount of tape on a book. pop staples, detached covers, pages, things like that. So, that also, having that in place really helps with the consistency and grading as well. So, so yeah, we've got a lot. And then we also spot check each other's work all the time too, and multiple graders in the high grade books. So, we're constantly monitoring the grades that are going out the doors. It is certainly not a situation where one guy is just grading out the door here and somebody's grading out over here, and there's no communication back and forth, because that's where you run into trouble.
Very good. So I want to clarify something, right? You're not talking about people having quotas that they're trying to hit, but what you are saying is that there is a standard that graders should abide by, and there are monitoring processes in place to assure that nothing is going awry, and that you're doing tests to make sure that you're kind of keeping things within a tight band to ensure that there is consistency. Yes?
Yeah, and we have quotas too. I mean, yeah. I mean, we, like I said, it's a balance. You can't do one or the other. You have to do both, and you have to balance both. That's
I guess what maybe I was referring to is quotas. Like a police would have quotas. They used to say for giving out a certain number of tickets per day. Right?
No. Yeah, no, we hey,
you can only give out so many 9.8s per day. I think that might have been where that.
No, yeah.
But just to be clear, you don't have quotas, right?
Great quotas. No, number quotas, yes. Number, yeah, number books graded, yes.
Yes. Okay. Just to be clear. All right. Very good. Very good. So I want to ask a couple more questions, and then we are going to wrap this thing up. Brittany, hopefully, if you can keep monitor of any last questions that you guys might want to answer on your side. And I don't know which of you is going to get this, right? So we talked a little bit about the grader's notes. How does CGC determine what grader's notes to add to something, or when to modify something, or someone has submitted something for consideration? Like, can we talk a little bit about how you decide what to put on a label? And I used the wrong term, not grader's notes, but comments on a label, like first appearance, death of, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay. So are you talking about, because there's label text that refers to the grade of the book, like, detached centerfold.
No, so I'm talking about like the significance of a given book. So this is someone's first appearance.
Oh, I see.
How do you decide what language goes on that label and what's significant enough to warrant being added to a label?
Now that's actually a changing thing, actually, believe it or not. Some of them are obvious. Some of them, First Appearance of Batman, that's going to be on the label day one. And we have a research team and also the graders as well, who all pitch in on giving suggestions about how things should be worded if it comes to that. Some of it's very straightforward. First appearance of this person, origin of that person. But sometimes things become relevant over time in the marketplace that warrant it going onto the label. And this is particularly true with Golden Age comics, because you've got, a lot of stuff going on in those books and on those covers that nobody cared about 10 years ago. And now, as, just like, label text and Newton rings and notes on defects, everybody's becoming a lot more, focused on these things. It's becoming, the game is getting a lot more tighter. So everybody's paying attention to these little nuances. And so, we'll have somebody that'll email us and say, hey, did you know that, this happened with this panel, page 6, or hey, Hitler's in the bottom corner of this cover, or or so and so drew this, drew this story in this issue, So as soon as we hear that, we research that, we put that on the label if we feel that it's if it's pertinent to the book, if it's true. We research all of that, and if it's something we put on there, we'll put on there, because that kind of information is only going to help collectors that own the book.
Agreed.
So,
we have actual collectors that will email customer service and say, I think this should be on a label. It gets sent to the graders, they agree, and we get that book back in and we reholder it and add that information to the label.
Yep, I've actually submitted some. My buddy JD, who is here in the room, has actually done it as well. And you guys have been very responsive to those types of things, because one of the things that also happens is that you have these things that happen in time, and then you have a writer who decides that they want to pull that thread that was just left out there by another writer in another time, and now that book that was just a thread dangling is now important. And I think it's important. I think it's great that you guys are constantly being willing to hear what people have to say about books of significance, and then making the adjustments where possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Brittany and Matt, any questions that you guys have seen in the chat that have kind of floated by that you guys want to address before we wrap up?
Can we fix fingerprints and pressing?
If they are, if the fingerprints are a substance on the cover, you know, you know, dirt or you know, some kind of material that gets on the cover, sometimes we can remove that. With the two problems we run into is when the fingerprints stain the paper, which we cannot remove, or when they smear the inks, which you see that a lot on Bronze Age books. Those two can't do anything about smeared inks, can't do anything about stains. But yeah, if it's dirt or substance on the surface, sometimes we can get that off. So yeah, it depends.
What's the minimum grade for a detached cover?
Detached cover. We went over that, 4.0.
Okay,
Yep.
and then last, someone said, and I'm going to do this in the attitude in which I think they said it. I saw a 98 with some sign Damn, what happened there?
I didn't catch that.
98.
I'm pretty sure the guy that asked that question didn't I ask it and
Nailed it. Oh yeah, he did. Oh yeah, he did. He can't. I saw 98 with some sign CGC slipping, bro.
That must have been graded by our blind grader that we have. We have a blind grader that works in the room, so you know, we don't discriminate.
But yeah, a 98 can have a spine tick.
A spine tick, yeah. You know what? If you have a book that you're worried about, send Brittany a picture of it. We'll address it.
Well, they'll lower your grade and then send your book back to you. So, all right. So I want to thank you guys. This was again another fun chat. I think that we hopefully have passed on some information to folks out there that will enable them to better be able to grade their own books and come closer to matching up with reality when that book gets graded, if that's what they decide to do. But so much of this is about just making us smarter at collectors. I want to thank everyone in the chat for keeping it civil, because I know that people can be passionate about things and sometimes that passion is misread. But I want to thank you guys for being civil to our guests. Thank you for being civil to me. Matt Thanatos, brother, I want to thank you for moderating the chat. I absolutely appreciate your help. And as Brittany just mentioned, if you guys have issues, questions, comments, or thoughts, don't hesitate to reach out to her. I too am available. And certainly if you guys want to post up your comments in the video when it actually gets uploaded, I'm confident that we can also have a robust discussion there as well. So as always, I want to thank you guys for spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope that you enjoyed this. And hopefully you will join us again soon for another chat. Matt, Brittany, thank you guys.
Thanks, Reggie. See y'all later.